I knew that what I had been ordered to do was wrong. I said so and was told to get on with it. What else could I do? If I'd not done it, someone else would have done it. But I have always expected to answer for this. This deed I never wished to do. And now it is the end of the road.
Immediately after the Second World War, the Allies sought justice for crimes committed against them. Britain pursued one war crime more than any other. The investigator was Frank McKenna, ex-detective turned RAF policeman. The crime was murder, the worst atrocity against Allied airmen of the entire war. The victims were 50 unarmed prisoners, shot in cold blood by the Gestapo after the Great Escape.
It was the coldest March for 30 years. There was snow on the ground and the conditions outside were brutal. It was evident to us that the Germans knew that there was a tunnel being built, and they'd searched the block several times, actually, and not found it.
The weather was getting worse, and the processes were all dated, and of course those would be wasted. And that would be an awful long time to have to do them all again. What we had was about 9 months' work.
On the night of March the 24th, 1944, 200 Allied airmen sat packed into Hut 104 at Nazi Germany's most secure prisoner of war camp in Sargen, near the Polish border. They were set to take part in the most ambitious prison breakout of the Second World War. It came to be known as the Great Escape. And it happened because of one man.
Well, I can remember hearing the name Roger Bushell quoted, because he was one of the legendary escapers. He'd been out several times, been stayed out for quite a long time, but then he hadn't appeared back again. And I heard his name being spoken of as somebody who might have been killed. And then I remember a distinct note of elation when people said that Roger Bushell's coming back. And there he was put in charge of escaping. One felt then that the thing was in safe hands.
He was a man of extreme ability, intelligence, and above all, single-mindedness. Whatever he did, he put his whole efforts into it. His real objective was to achieve this grand slam, as it were, the big tunnel.
Bushell harnessed the manpower and skills of the camp. 600 men had spent a year digging, forging documents, and turning uniforms into civilian clothes. What the organization couldn't make had to be acquired. The few German speakers became scroungers, bribing guards for whatever was needed. One of them was Dennis Cochrane, fluent in German since he was 18.
Dennis was the eldest, then was Keith, and then myself, and then a younger brother 4 years later. I think we all knew without any doubt at all that he would be railing against the captivity. He'd be like a caged lion.
Dennis Cochrane had joined the RAF in 1940 and been shot down over the Channel. He'd been a prisoner for over a year.
My mother suddenly died, and we didn't know what to do about telling Dennis. We knew it would be a terrible news for him to have in those circumstances. But of course, as time went on, there was no option but to tell him. And his next letter came back and he said, "This is the worst day of my life." So the news obviously affected him most frightfully. That, I think, would have strengthened his resolve even more so if it had needed it. His letters then were always, "I'll be home soon."
Home was on the mind of many that night. Tom Kirby Green, Bushel's head of security, hadn't seen his wife or young son for more than 2 years.
My adored darling, I am thinking so much of you now, and long so hard for you. I feel so grateful for your love and tenderness, and so humble. Soon, I hope, I shall be able to make the world a paradise for you and for Colin. I love you, darling.
What more can I say? Kisses to you, your Thomas. This is my father's letter written on the day of the escape. Now that letter is shorter than the others because he didn't have much time. But I don't think he probably could find enough words really to say all the things he wanted to say, although he did try. He was basically a very, very gentle person, I think. He liked cars, he loved sailing, and he loved my mother. He really did, enormously. And I think he loved me. I just know that I missed him. And he was this kind of distant sort of hero.
As we came in, we were allocated to a particular part of the hut. The orders were to sit down and stay there until you were called. It was actually remarkably quiet, I think, considering what was about to happen.
I had papers as a Yugoslav woodworker. My colleague I was going with, a chap called Soteris Skanzaklaus, a Greek fighter pilot, he had, of course, had papers as a Greek. My own plan was to get into Czechoslovakia, try and get down the Danube into Greece, where, of course, my partner would have been useful. He might go to help us get over into Turkey, neutral territory. So that was our rather ambitious plan.
I was supposed to be a French worker. I had a smattering of French, schoolboy French, which is and documents which might pass a cursory inspection. I had a small quantity of genuine German currency, which would have been enough to buy me a ticket on a local train where you didn't need a travel permit.
Those who weren't going by train were just told the best thing to do is go south. And when you get into Czechoslovakia, you may find that they're helpful. But we sort of mugged up a phrase in Czechoslovakian, which I can't remember exactly, but it went something like this. Ja prisahám pri smrti mé matky jsem anglický officer. I swear by the death of my mother that I am an English officer.
Well, you always think there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and that light's going to be home. We thought it was very, very difficult to escape from Germany. And probably less than 1% of people who got out of camps got home. We thought there'd always be a chance.
But things went wrong from the start. It took over an hour to open the tunnel exit because the ground was frozen. And when they finally broke through, the diggers realized there had been a terrible mistake. The tunnel was too short to reach the safety of the woods.
The reason it was short, I don't know. I think, putting it bluntly, I think the surveyors boomed. And we couldn't get out and measure it on the ground.
Bushell and his team quickly devised a system to get the men out without being seen in the open. But valuable time had been lost. Already the escape was nearly 2 hours behind schedule.
The thing is, they didn't come and tell us what had happened. We just sat there and waited and waited. You know, you couldn't all chatter or anything. You just had to sit and sort of think your thoughts, because the guards did patrol at night outside.
Roger Bushell was number 7 into the tunnel, in the first group out. Following him, his escape partner, Frenchman Bernard Scheidhauer, number 8. Dennis Cochrane, number 16, travelling alone. Midnight. Tom Kirby Green, number 21. Escape partner, Gordon Kidder, Canadian, number 20. Jimmy James was number 39.
Finally, the word came for us to go, and, it was a very exhilarating moment, because we climbed down the shaft. It was like 30 foot down, like going down a ship's hold. And we finally got to the exit hole and looked up and saw the stars. The RAF motto came to mind, Per Radio ad Astra. And certainly we'd had a great deal of work. Now we were going up to the stars.
Jimmy James went out at 1:30 a.m. with Greek escaper Nick Skanzikas.
As you got through to the end, you were told to, they were guided, over there it is, cheerio, and you climbed up the ladder. And I had a hell of a job climbing up this ladder because it's pitch dark and I just couldn't get it right. Having got onto the first rung, I couldn't bend my knee far enough to get onto the second rung. But what I did, in fact, was pull myself up hand over hand, up 30 feet, you know, and sort of stop a bit and then pull myself up a bit more and finally get to the top.
Les Broderick, travelling with Canadian Henry Birkeland, was number 52 out of the tunnel.
And when I got into the woods and looked back, it was amazing this thing hadn't been found because there was a column of steam rising out of the hole. It was so hot down there and so cold outside.
6 hours in, and it was all going so well. But luck ran out at 5 a.m. A guard had stumbled on the tunnel exit. The escape was over.
But sometime in the early hours of the morning that heard a single shot. And you could feel the shock of that shot sort of quivering throughout the whole camp, and everybody else would be listening for that.
It was pandemonium. We knew immediately that the balloon had gone up, and it won't be long before the goons are here. You've got to destroy everything you could, which we promptly did. And the next thing is being hustled onto the parade ground. Obviously, they were trying to count, and I suppose the objective of those who were playing up was to fool the people on how many had got out, numbers. And they only do it by trying to sort of fall out of one rank and go into another, that sort of thing. There were one or two calls for them to still stand, so forth. They still tried it on, and finally the commandant stepped forward, drew and cocked his pistol, and said, "I shall personally shoot the next officer who moves."
Of the 200 escapers, 76 were free. But now they had to get away.
We got to our station about, I think it must have been about 4:30 in the morning. There was a Pole called Bonshine who was detailed to get our tickets because he spoke fluent German, and he had a leave pass, and he pushed this into the ticket clerk and said 12 tickets to Boberosdorf. And the man looked a bit surprised and went away and came back again. He said 12, and Monshine said aggressively, "You're 12," and glared at him, and he went away again and produced our tickets. We looked out on a very snowy, bleak landscape, and after a while the Dodger leant over and said in a stage whisper, "I haven't seen such a snowy scene since I left Montreal."
I remember Plunkett telling me Roger Bushell came along the corridor, and he just put his hand down, slipped his hand into Plunkett's, and just gave him a slight squeeze of the hand. Didn't say anything, didn't look at him. I noticed he was doing this to all the other escapers who were standing in the train. But this is Roger Bushell just saying that he was still in charge. Wished him all the best, and so on.
It filled up with school children later on, about 8 o'clock. And then suddenly a very tough woman guard came along and started shouting at Rusty Keroth, who was an Australian with us. And we didn't know what she was saying, but it turned out he was just tearing him off for smoking.
For those not travelling by train, it was hard going.
It was all pine forest around there. And we got into an area where the snow was quite deep, and we laboured along and decided, right, we will have to. It's light now, we'll have to settle down and hope. And we could hear voices all day practically, but no one came near us, luckily. I can remember clearly, I remembered all these stories of the Arctic that I've read when I was a kid about whatever you do, don't fall asleep in the snow because you won't wake up.
My father and Gordon Kidder were trying to get to Czechoslovakia. Now, what they were going to do after that, I don't know. Except, I think, hope that the partisans would somehow get them to somewhere neutral or somewhere where they could link up with British forces or something. So I think he got out. He tried to get out and started the escape thinking he had a chance, at least. And a chance had to be something to be taken.
The Germans had already launched a nationwide manhunt. But when Hitler got the news, the day after the escape, he flew into a rage. That same afternoon, Gestapo heads in 8 German cities received unprecedented orders, as Frank McKenna discovered 3 years later.
Tell me, how did you receive these orders?
Orders were received by teleprint, marked for my eyes only.
And what did they say?
From memory, they said, the escape of officer prisoners is a menace to internal securities. As a deterrent, the Fuhrer has ordered that more than half of the escaped officers are to be shot. After interrogations, they will be returned to their original camp and killed en route. These shootings were to be explained by reporting that the recaptured officers were killed whilst trying to escape or while resisting arrest, so that nothing can be proved later.
Hitler's first reaction had been to shoot them all. His senior advisors did their best to dissuade him from an act that would break every rule of war. Then shoot more than half, retorted the Fuhrer. Himmler, head of the Gestapo, chose a figure. 50 would die. Bushel and Scheidhauer, traveling west, made good progress by train. They were heading for France, where Scheidhauer had contacts who could get them away to England. Dennis Cochrane, traveling alone, was also heading west. He planned to cross the border into neutral Switzerland, and from there to freedom.
I think he probably felt he could get farther on his own. He was one among the very early escapees, I think about number 7 or 8. I think the fluent German speakers had priority. Those who stood more chance of getting at farther distance. I think he thought whatever happened that he would come through. And I think even with the escape, he would have gone into it thinking he would succeed. Not just we'll disrupt the German nation, but I think he personally thought he would succeed.
But by now, over 100,000 German troops had joined the hunt for the escapers. The net was closing in.
We walked to Hirschberg West Station, which had trains going down to the Czech border. We were intercepted before we could start buying any tickets by a policeman and a civilian. He said, well, what are you doing here? And I said, well, we're going to buy tickets. He said, papiera, papers. And I showed him my pass, and he just put it in his pocket. I said, well, look, I've got to get down to Belgrade to have Yugoslavia, see my old mother in German. And he said, well, that's all right. You can come down to the station and explain all that.
Now it was so miserable and cold, everything was wet through. And then about the middle of the night, there's old Henry Birkeland started mumbling and talking to himself, and we thought there's something wrong with him, and he was suffering from something. And I decided, well, we've got to get undercover tonight at least. In the distance we saw a speck of light and thought, well, there must be something there. Approached this hut, knocked on the door, and the reason the lights were on was because there were 4 German guards billeted there, and they came out with their rifles, and that was the end of our walk.
Well, of course, we all met in the police station, and they were all marched down. Men are called the policemen, 8 of us, and we were all shoved into the same cell. The fact remains that we were beaten by the weather, because if it had been warmer, we probably wouldn't have gone into the town at all, or tried to get train. We'd probably tried to get across the mountains and keep hidden. The weather beat everybody.
In Berlin, SS General Arthur Nieb, head of Germany's criminal police, was ordered to compile the death list. As escapers came into custody, he decided who would live and who would die. The Gestapo would carry out the killings until 50 were dead. Far to the west, Buschel and Scheidauer had reached the border town of Saarbrücken. It was less than an hour's walk to France. And their passes got them through. Then it all went wrong. A policeman called out, "Good luck," and Scheidauer answered in English. It was an old trick, and it cost them their freedom. For 2 days they held out, refusing to give their names or any other details. But under threat of being shot as spies, they came clean and admitted they were escaped prisoners, believing they would be returned to Sargon. Tom Kirby Green and Gordon Kidder made it to Czechoslovakia, but they got no further. They were captured near the Austrian border. Evidence suggests that during interrogation they were tortured.
The Gestapo arrived. We could recognize them because they were dressed like, Hollywood Gestapo agents, long leather coats and so on. We saw the guys being taken away. We didn't know who was who.
Yes, I remember this. It was the 29th of March. 4 names were called out. Skansiklas, Pavlok, Kavnarski, and Werman. He said, these men are to pack up their things and follow me. Because we thought they were going back to Sargon.
At the same time, in 7 jails all over Germany, other names were being called out. In all, 18 escapers were moved that day and told they were returning to the camp. Among them, Tom Kirby Green and Gordon Kidder, released after 2 days' interrogation. Some hours into the journey, They were invited to get out and stretch their legs.
I knew he was a prisoner of war. I knew about barbed wire and that sort of thing. Everyone was saying how he was safe now. He was safe now. So I didn't worry. And they also said, and I believed them, and I wanted to believe them, that I would see him again one day.
Like all the victims, Tom Kirby Green's death certificate read simply, "shot while trying to escape."
Tell me exactly what happened.
I was called in to see my superior. He had a teleprint in front of him and asked me if I'd ever been in action. I said I hadn't. Then he said, "What I am telling you now must remain secret. There are 2 English flyers at Saarbrücken. They are to be shot on the orders of the Führer." I said that couldn't be right, to shoot unarmed officers. He replied, "You are acting on my orders and will follow my instructions."
The officers were Roger Bushell and Bernard Scheidauer.
We drove for some distance, then the driver was ordered to stop. We got out and told the prisoners they should get out and stretch their legs, as we had a long way to go. I was standing near the car, just behind the English flyer. I would say I was about 5 meters away from him. My fellow officer was standing just behind the other man, the Frenchman. We raised our pistols together, and we both fired. He just crumpled up and fell on his right side. As I walked near him, I could see there was still movement, so I put my gun near his temple and fired again. He died immediately. I knew that what I had been ordered to do was wrong. I said so and was told to get on with it. What else could I do? If I had not done it, someone else would have done it. If we had all refused, we would all have been shot. But I have always expected to answer for this. This deed I never wished to do. And now it is the end of the road.
By March the 30th, 6 days after the escape, Roger Bushell and 21 of his men were dead. Many more were in German custody. But a handful remained on the run. Dennis Cochran had gone to ground for a while, merging with a gang of foreign workers, street sweeping in Frankfurt, before moving on again. Now he was 550 miles from the camp and near his journey's end. Switzerland and freedom lay just across the Rhine.
The door opened about 5 in the morning. The Meister put his head round the corner and said, Aufsteh, come. I said, get up, come with me. I said, why? He said, you'll find out. Well, at the bottom of the stairs, there was a couple of square-shouldered Gestapo types. One of them produced a revolver and said, machst du keine Dummheit? Don't do anything stupid. We drove out of Berlin, came to a dark wood, and out of the dark wood rose up a big wall with electric wire on top of it. And I reckoned this was guard towers. I reckoned this was my destination. I wasn't far wrong. The SS officer in front told me to get out. He said, oh, Herr James, he said, this is a nice place. He said, you will not escape from here. Marched down to the end hut, where I came face to face with Wing's Day. Well, Wing Commander Day had been a senior British officer. Oh, I said, hello, sir, where am I? It's just Colditz. And he said, no, I wish to hell it was, but the only way out of here is up the chimney. It's Sachsenhausen concentration camp.
Dennis Cochrane nearly made it all the way. But he was arrested right on the Swiss frontier, within sight of freedom. It's almost certain that it was his forged pass that finally gave him away. The Germans had changed the layout of all official passes in an attempt to catch the escapers.
The Reichsführer SS has ordered that the British airman Cochrane will be taken over by officials of your office, and during transport in the direction Breslau will be shot whilst trying to escape. The shooting will be done in such a way that the prisoner concerned will be unaware of what is going to happen. Signed, Müller, Lieutenant General of Police. Lurach, I think, was the last place he was picked up, which is a long way. You see, 7 nights he was away from the camp. 7 days, 7 nights. I want to know what his life was like in that time. I never shall.
Dennis had been shot twice, once in the back of the head and again after he collapsed in the back of the heart. His body was taken to a nearby concentration camp and burned.
I think Bill Jennings called everybody to attention. We all stood up briefly, and Massey came forward and said, and he was obviously deeply moved. He said, I was called to the Commandant's office this morning, where he gave me the awful news that of the 76 officers who went out of the tunnel, 45 have been killed.
The senior officer was told this. His immediate reaction was how many were wounded, and after certain denials, the Germans admitted that none were wounded, they were all killed.
And then a few days later, a list appeared. By this time, the number had gone up from 44 or 45 to 50. There you are not around this notice board all day long. There are people going up and reading it again, not believing it could be true, really.
I know that I think it was Al Hake whose toes were frostbitten, but he was shot trying to escape. He could hardly walk.
One felt that it was just part of the huge wheel of fate, you know, that there but all my friends had been, a lot of my friends had been killed. Well, there but for the grace of God, well, I could have gone too.
I don't know, at this stage, I suppose you're just lucky, felt how lucky you were that you'd survived. Just shock mainly, I suppose, and some relief and wonder, why the heck wasn't I one of them?
Of the 76 who'd got out, only 3 had made it home. The other survivors remained in German custody until the end of the war.
Dear Angela, dear Ingeborg, dear Helga, you dears of mine. I am sorry I could not say goodbye to you. I am a prisoner now because of carrying out an official order, and now I'm waiting for justice. If I did not tell you anything, it was because I did not want to worry you. How much easier it would be to suffer death 3 times in order to stop this happening to you, and especially the children. Be brave. I shall write again if I can. Ever your faithful husband, your daddy, and your Emil.
I can remember being with my father when he opened the telegram. Just a bland statement, shot trying to escape, details to follow. And that was all. They didn't have anything else to say at the time, you see, to tell us. He just read it and passed it to me. And it was just a sort of numbness, you know.
My mother came to see me for the day. It wasn't my birthday, and I had a sort of day out of school, and I didn't question it really because I was so pleased to see her. And it was wonderful to have a day to be taken off for tea somewhere by your mum, and as usual, when the time came for her to go, she was very tearful. She always was whenever we parted. And so it didn't seem to have a special significance. She couldn't bring herself to tell me the moment when she came in order to tell me that he died. Her courage failed her then. She, completely understandably, but she said to me many, many years later that she felt she'd really let me down. Which of course she hadn't.
McKenna's investigation sent 18 Gestapo officers to trial for murder. 5 were given prison terms ranging from 10 years to life. 13 were sentenced to death. Emil Schultz was hanged on February the 26th, 1948, in the yard at the British prison at Hameln, near Hamburg. The remains of the 50 were brought back to the camp by the Gestapo in the summer of 1944. Their final resting place is in Poznan, Poland, just a few miles from the camp they fought so hard to escape.
Hank Bertland, Gordon Bratell, Johnny Bull,
Roger Bushell, Mike Casey, Jimmy Catanack, Arnold Christensen,
Dennis Cochran, Ian Cross, Haldor Espelid, Brian Evans, Niels Fuglesang, Johannes Goose.
Was it worth it? They did say that 100,000 troops were involved in searching. But I suppose we did cause a lot of disruption, I suppose. But was it worth it? I don't think so.